This session is titled India and its Tryst with TNE, Policy and Perspective. The session delves into the landmark policy shifts that have redefined India's position within the global education ecology. Panelists will analyze the transformative impact of the National Education Policy 2020 and the 2023 UGC Regulations, which together provide the framework for foreign universities to operate within India with significant autonomy. The discussion will examine how these policies facilitate the creation of domestic education hubs, such as Gift City, while simultaneously encouraging Indian institutions to establish a presence abroad. Experts will unpack the theoretical and practical implications of these regulations on traditionally national character of Indian education system. Ultimately, this session aims to evaluate how these policy perspectives address the challenges of global competition and foster a more integrated transnational education landscape. Before we begin, I want to remind you again of some housekeeping rules. Kindly keep your mobile phones on silent mode during all sessions. Each session, as you know, is followed by a Q&A, so keep your questions ready and refrain from recording the session as it being streamed online on YouTube. I request the moderator, Dr. Neeta Inamdar, and speakers of the session to take the stage. Dr. Rajan Saxena, former Vice Chancellor, NIMS University, Dr. Shakila Shamsho, former OSD, NEP, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, Dr. Vijay Khare, Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Director, International Center, SBPU, Mr. Elder Matthews, Program Officer, IHE, Kerala, State Higher Education Council, and Dr. Chetan Singhai, Dean, School of Law, Governance and Public Policy, Chanakya University, Bangalore. Dr. Neeta Inamdar is Dean, Faculty of Education, Research Professor, and Head of Symbiosis Center for Higher Education Research and Policy Advocacy, and Organizing Secretary of IHE Conference 2026. She also functions as the advisor to the Symbiosis Center for European Studies. She is known for her work in higher education policy and practice, particularly in the field of international education. She has 3 books to her credit: Internationalization of Higher Education, The Dynamics of Educational Ecology, Reimagining Border in Cross-Border Education, and Contours of India, EU Engagements, Multiplicity of Experiences, all published by Manipal University Press and Routledge. Apart from these books, she has several publications that highlight her expertise in the area of education in general and international education in specific. She holds the coveted Jean Monnet Chair for her contribution to the field of European studies. She has led major EU-funded projects in content and language-integrated learning and internationalization and harmonization of higher education. Most of her academic work is in the global politics of higher education, bringing together her experience and expertise that is at the intersection of international education and international relations. I now hand it over to ma'am to continue with the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Suchetna, for this elaborate introduction. And very, very happy to have the distinguished panelists with me. But before we go ahead and start this conversation, I just wish to say that when you look around in this world, when you read news, what we feel is a dearth of patience. But here, when I see you all, there's a ray of hope. So much patience that you've been sitting here with us for 3 days. So wonderful audience. And that's the reason in this particular session that we're going to have, I wish to keep a lot of time for question and answers, if it's okay with all the panelists. We will have 2 rounds of conversations where I will ask you for your views on the policy matters, but after that, maybe we will open the floor because they have been very patient, very interactive. And so I already tell the audience, please prepare your questions because we're going to have more of them at the end of this session. So thank you very much. And we now start with what we intend to say. But before that, I'll just quickly introduce my panelists one by one, asking them for the first views. Can I start with you, ma'am? Yes. So Dr. Shakila Shamsu, she has been, I think many of you have listened to her interventions on day one and already know her, but still for those who are joining directly here, I'm introducing here Dr. Shakila Shamsu is the former officer on special duty, New Education Policy 2020, NEP 2020, Ministry of Education, Government of India. She's an education policy expert and former officer on special duty, as mentioned earlier, where she served as a secretary to the drafting committee. With nearly 4 decades of experience across academia and public policy, she has held roles in the Planning Commission of India and taught for over 25 years at the University of Mumbai and Indira Gandhi National Open University. She currently serves as a visiting professor at National Institute of Technology, Calicut, and advises governments, higher education institutions, and policy implementation and institutional development. She also mentors people like us. So thank you very much for being with us. And to begin with, the question to you, I would like to ask is, you were part of the NEP drafting. You were very, very closely associated with what was happening at that time. And there were, probably many of you know, there are 2 paragraphs about internationalization, 12.7, 12.8, page number 39, maybe. Okay, only the second half of the page is all that is written. And some of us, when we looked at it, half page for internationalization. So a little disappointed, but never imagined that this would be the extent of impact. Did you imagine when this was being drafted that this would be the impact that we are going to see? Because 2020 we had, 2021 there was already, 2021 July there was guidelines on internationalization of higher education that were announced by UGC. 2022 we already had more regulations coming about recognition of degrees, twinning programs, what does it mean, so defining everything and giving more details. And 2023, the opening up of the entire sector to foreign higher education institutions. So when you look at that, was it envisioned in those 2 paragraphs or was it an afterthought?
Thank you, Dr. Neeta, for firstly inviting me to the IHE conference, and of course to Dr. Vidya Yeravadekar and the entire Symbiosis family for making me a part of this conversation. Frankly speaking, Dr. Neeta, we need to look at the NEP 2020 as a culmination of a process that we started for internationalization of higher education way back, I would say. I mean, theoretically, as far as committees and so on are concerned, from about early 2000. And so that has been a work in progress where we are talking about mobility, where we looked at faculty exchanges and student exchanges, which was, of course, at a very, very nascent stage. And thereafter, you have a number of efforts that went into the plan documents, which talked about internationalization. The idea that we realized that India cannot just do it on its own if it needs to find its place in the global map. And therefore, the need to look at internationalization of higher education. At the same time, when we wrote the draft national education policy that many of you may not have seen, the 484-page document. Chetan over here is a part of the same team. The kind of work we did into, speaking to people and getting the narratives. And in fact, maybe it won't be out of place, but I'll try to stick to the time limit. The NEP is a process of a lot of participative exercises where we had thematic consultations with so many bodies and so on. So when we wrote the 2 paragraphs, you see, it is not that the 66-page document was a pressy writing of 484 page. So we know that the allocation of space may be limited. because you're covering an entire sector and a policy document. I mean, the secretary at that time was clearly telling me that, Shakila, you're not writing a report. You're writing a government policy document, and that has got to be crisp. All implementation comes in later in terms of guidelines. So we definitely knew that even one single line that we write can have a major impact. So when we talked about the 4 types of mobility in those 2 paragraphs, which is of course an extension of faculty mobility, student mobility, when the institutional mobility came in, the setting up of the International Students Office as internationalization at home, and the idea that we can have program and credit mobility, we did know, or rather understand, that these simple 2 paragraphs would be able to be an impetus for all in the sector to really use that as a leveraging point to go ahead and bring about those kind of changes. So the impact, if one were to see in the larger picture of NEP implementation, in terms of other reforms, which we are not very happy about, but we are quite happy with what has been happening in the space of internationalization of education. But let me also be very clear here. The idea was to bring internationalization at home more than maybe the outbound mobility, though that was a window that we had laid it open when we put that point. Yeah.
Thank you for those very initial remarks. I'll come back to you. Was it in, so when you look at international branch campuses coming into India, you're talking about internationalization at home. How do you see them aligning with each other? So are you looking at them as places where they will get a lot of international students to come and study here in those institutions or in Indian institutions? How do you see that? Can you draw parallels to that?
Let me relate this to also the target that we set for the gross enrollment ratio. And let me also make it very clear that we were more concerned about the outflow of our students. And so when we talked about the IBCs, it was more in terms of seeing whether we could retain that segment of the student population, which is actually flowing out of the country, and where the numbers were exponentially going up. If, of course, as a part of the benefits that we could get, if we could get a few countries to send in their students over here, that would, of course, be an added advantage. But the effort was more to prevent the kind of revenue loss that we were having, the kind of fears of our students going out and the brain drain that would happen because they don't come back. And therefore, whether we could cater to a segment of population, like has been said over all the panels that we discussed, that they are at home and still having the experience of getting kind of a degree which is coming in from a foreign university. So that was, of course, the major, but the other one would follow. But I think that was not really looking at as maybe a secondary kind of, let us say, impact that we were looking at. The primary impact was to prevent the outbound flow. Yeah.
Great. So thank you, and I'll come back to you later again on that. Dr. Rajan Saxena, to introduce to the audience here, is an institution builder, a scholar of marketing, and author of author of several books, a distinguished leader in Indian higher education. He served as the Vice Chancellor of Nasi Monjee Institute of Management Studies from 2009 to 2020, a long journey there, and previously held leadership roles at Indian Institute of Management, Indore, SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, IBS, Gurgaon, and he's a graduate of Sri Ram College of Commerce with a PhD from Delhi School of Economics. He has published several articles and authored several books in marketing. So he currently advises the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also Symbiosis. So he sits on many of the important boards in Symbiosis as well. He is somebody who comes with experience and expertise in economics and also management. So when you look at transnational education, so ma'am said this is basically about to prevent brain drain, and also probably not only arrest the outflow of student, but also arrest the foreign exchange outflow. despite remittances being so high, even if somebody went, not necessarily making for an economic argument. You know, there are these different arguments that exist. But probably it was because, basically to see that we move from a consumption-led economy to an innovation-led economy, because earlier, Mr. Pame also spoke about how innovation is at the center of these discussions. So how do you, as a professor of economics, of marketing, of management in general, how do you see this entire thing? Do you see a very economic rationale for this policy of opening up? Or do you see it more than that?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to everybody. And I must say that congratulations to the organizers and to each one of you for the fact that you are all over here in the last session of a 2-day conference, which is a very rare kind of a phenomena, I must say. So that's where I salute each one of you who's over here and patiently listening to the panel that is discussing something which looks to me not only challenging from the point of view of the theme per se, but equally it is from the point of view of keeping you all interested in the whole discussion itself. So thank you very much. Well, coming back to what Dr. Shakila was mentioning about it, and I think it's, and Dr. Nita, you were mentioning about it. I think when I look at, and I quite agree with what Dr. Shakila said, that the national education policy has been a culmination of a whole lot of a development that had already been taking place in this country. One is very clearly the fact that the demographics had been radically changing in this country. And with the demographics changing, one thing that was emerging was very clearly that the aspirational levels of India were changing. And aspirational young India was wanting an experience which was global, an experience that they could possibly have it outside, but they were not getting it back in their own country. Post-liberalization, they had tasted that when it came to the marketplace itself, the products, the services, etc. But when it came to education, I think we were miserably failing behind. We failed behind. The 90s was a decade when India should have actually opened up when it came to higher education. We failed over there. We did not. The Southeast Asia did open up. And therefore, a lot of institutions did go over there. But then, when it came to our own selves, we did not. So in the 2000 onwards, while the aspirations were changing, education system in the country was remaining where it was. The technology was changing, but we were not changing. In the universities were not changing. We were still talking about a very rigid structure. We were still talking about a very, I would say, an insulated structures, vestibuled program structures. There was hardly any kind of a dialogue between departments, or for that matter, let us say, students from one department to another department. As a consequence of which, it was a very normal kind of a consequence of what was happening around Indian institution. That a lot of young students found merit in going out of India and pursuing even the undergraduate education. So while at one stage, the exodus would take place at the graduate level kind of an education, at a master's level, 2000 onwards, we started seeing a large number of students going in even for the undergraduate education itself. And one of the kind of reason was very clear, the flexibility that they were getting. Liberal education, which was the cornerstone of let's say, any development exercise was missing in Indian education. So the student at the age of 16 or 17 would have to make a choice of either having to pursue either in a social sciences program or in humanities or in engineering or in sciences, little realizing at a subsequent, or let's say when he or she would realize that he's not made out for that, that means that much of a time period was lost, which is where then NEP was really trying to plug it in. But the second big part was that as India was changing and as the demographics was becoming more and more aspirational, as the Indian population was becoming more and more aspirational, but Indian institutions were not changing. The second part which was happening was not only that our programs were lagging behind, but equally we were missing out at the global level. Our research was lagging behind. So we had three major challenges in Indian higher education, for which we needed a very different answer. One was very clearly the fact that we needed more institutions to be, because looking at the education, the demographics, we needed more number, we needed more universities, we needed more number of colleges, we needed more institutions of in different categories itself. The second one was, very clearly, we wanted to develop excellence in Indian higher education. And the third that was happening was that we were not able to create a model which should be equitable to all. So our challenges were essentially looking at it from the point of view of three parts: excellence, equity, and access. What globalization has happened, what globalization and should do, to my mind, the translational education policy should do, is to help us in these areas, in the three areas. So far, it is I doubt if it does I doubt if it does anywhere. It neither expands the capacity, neither we are talking about it from the point of view of excellence so far, nor equity. But let us see, it is still an open early.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you for those very interesting opening remarks and also bringing out what exactly happened after the liberalization. And actually what it makes sense, because it could have opened much earlier, but there was kind of most of them being public universities where probably there was some kind of a reluctance to change in the beginning and to accept or embrace liberalization. So I now bring in Dr. Chetan. Professor Chetan is Dean, School of Law, Governance and Public Policy at Chanakya University, Bengaluru. He's a professor and dean, and who is also looking after many of the academic programs and driving the academics in Chanakya University. His academic and policy work focuses on higher education governance and reform, with particular emphasis on National Education Policy 2020 and National Curriculum Framework. He has contributed national and state level education policy and curriculum initiatives, leads interdisciplinary program design and research on policy implementation, institutional quality, and internationalization of Indian higher education. Many of us here know about the kind of work you have done. You have been part of the NEP team. So now the question to you is, how do you see a political rationale under this entire opening up? The question to Professor Rajan Saxena was about economic rationale, but for you, when it comes to you, I wish to see, can you identify exactly what was the political rationale for opening up of Indian education system to foreign higher education institutions? Or do you think it's beyond that?
Thank you, Dr. Nita, and thank you for the invitation. I would take on from where Dr. Saxena sir left. I think to put it in perspective, in the 90s, we liberated Lakshmi, but not Saraswati. And it is to be done soon, because I think the idea is institutions still remain largely under the control of the system that we are part of in own form. There are few who are in islands of excellence. There are many in the sea of mediocrity. And that's where this issue of, so hence, partly my response is not going to be political, and because it's something which is beyond my capacity to think through, but essentially looking from the policy frame, how this idea, what Dr. Shakila rightly mentioned, the idea of internationalization at home vis-a-vis internationalization beyond, that we look at in various forms, cross-border, transnational, higher education. See, injecting the Indian ethos, Indian experience into the internationalization component of any learner would get experience too was a larger intent, because we have so much to share. It's not that we have nothing to share. We also have a lot to share given the local context that we are in. And our historical antecedents clearly tell that globally we were known to be the heart of learning spaces, right? So there is so much to continue and so much to engage. That was the spirit in which it was thought through. But when you talk about transnationalization or internationalization as a nation-building project, that becomes very central. I think that narrative is what, again, Dr. Shakila clearly mentioned, that there is an intent out there in the policy draft NEP, which is half the size of Harry Potter, and I think everybody should read it. And then there is the 66-page document, which is the extension of the vision. So that's more operational document. I think the vision document clearly states the intent on these kinds, that we have to see internationalization not as a siloed component in the larger agenda of the nation and its purpose in which it is driving towards nation building, whether it is aligned to the existing visions that are out there in the economic component or the social transformational component, but it has to be seen as an integrated engagement. So I'll give one quick example in this case. So for the very first time in the country, as a result of NEP, we are talking about education as a continuum. Otherwise, we saw structurally and as well as in terms of attitudinal sort of perceptions that we have in the neighborhood, that school and higher education were not coming together. But there is internationalization in school as well. There's internationalization in higher education as well. But now we are seeing them coming together because we are looking at upward integration from school to higher education, and also the impact that would potentially come to the teaching, which happens in school education. So it's an integrated approach. That's what NEP clearly highlights. I think it's the reading of that document in that spirit, and then its engagement in practice is where this void needs to be filled. And that's why I'm not sure about the political will in this larger context at this stage, but the document, the vision is clear on that, that it has to be taken into all dimensions of existence. This is what I would share.
Great, thank you. Thank you for those first remarks, Chetan. I will now bring Eldo, Mr. Eldo Matthews. He's the program officer of Kerala State Higher Education Council. He leads the Council Scholar Connect Academic Diaspora Engagement Initiative. An MPhil graduate from JNU, currently nearing his PhD submission. His research focuses on internationalization and the growth of private higher education. Previously a consultant for the World Bank, Eldo has held roles at NEPA, Planning Commission, the British Council, and India's Ministry of Education. His work is widely published in EPW, IHE, UWN, Times Higher Education, and The Hindu, as well as volumes by Sage and Rutledge. If you haven't been following, you're missing something very important. He regularly writes for many of the newspapers, I think, and he writes also with Professor Altbach quite often. So probably it's time some of the younger students here, maybe you would like to connect with him and learn more from him. But when it comes to this particular panel, Eldo, I want to know, how do you see the educational rationale? Do you see an educational rationale in this? For example, what is the impact it's going to have on the entire educational teaching, learning of for students, for faculty members? Do you see that? I mean, that the entire opening is going to have an impact on the education system as such?
For me, approaching TNE in an entirely different angle, I think that would be helpful in this context. And I would like to build on what Dr. Matthew Wittenstein said in the morning session, and to Dr. Gayatri. She also covered some issues about the stratification in the school education system, because Dr. Matthew mentioned about the higher education sector in India, which is not only in India, in many parts of the developing countries, this is an under-researched area. Those who are working on the sector are aware of this fact, because there are only few faculty members who are working on higher education as a subject area. And the second issue is that this area is under-researched, and second is Dr. Gayatri mentioned about the stratification in the school system. I would like to approach this TNE, the growth of transnational education, not only the internationalization or branch campuses. I would like to view as a comprehensive way, because there are joint degree programs, dual degree programs. All these areas have been witnessing a growth in the last decade, because our school sector has been witnessing a growth since the 1980s, especially the private sector growth. And the needs of the students coming out of the private sector are different, because like Shakila Madam mentioned about to preventing the outbound mobility of the students. And also, India has been witnessing the growth in the number of students going outside the country for higher education. Because our policies, not only the government of India policies, even the state government policies have also been trying to address these issues. And it is important to approach the growth of TNE in this context. Because TNE as a sector, I don't think that it would be able to address the needs of the society, because in terms of GER, because the National Education Policy talks about achieving 50% GER by 2035. But if you review the growth of the transnational education programs in the country, and also the recent growth of establishing these branch campuses, and also more number of institutions are in the pipeline. They are all, in terms of numbers, only few, and in terms of number of students, also few thousands. That's why in terms of addressing the GER targets of the country, the TNE, this growth would have only a minimal role. But at the same time, transnational education system will certainly can address the needs of the emerging, that kind of those students coming out of these private schools in the country, because the stakeholder expectations are entirely different. And that's why all these changes are addressing the needs of a different, a kind of a layered higher education system. And the stratification process, which we witnessed in the school sector, now started to permeate to the Indian higher education system also. And in the next decades also, we can see a growth in the sector, because addressing the needs of these elite and semi-elite groups are important for the policy makers. I would stop there too.
Thank you, Eldo. And now I'll wish to bring in Professor Khare. He's the Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Director, International Center at Savitribai Phule, Pune University. And his expertise is in defense and strategic studies, and has also served as a dean in the same faculty earlier. His research focuses on national security, strategic studies, human security, and international relations. A Fulbright scholar and an Erasmus fellow, he has led several international collaborations and EU-funded projects on higher education internationalization. He has authored numerous books and research papers, and has played a key role in developing interdisciplinary programs in national security and public policy. So I kept you last for a reason. So when you look at international relations and the TNE, so do you see a geopolitical rationale in in making, for this openness of, when I'm saying openness, it's not only about Indian, foreign higher education institutions coming in and establishing campuses, but also Indian institutions being encouraged to go and establish campus. We need to also take that into account, because when we say TNE, we're not only talking about IVCs in India, but Indian universities also going and establishing campuses out there. How do you think geopolitically there is a very strong rationale for something like TNE? Your views.
Thank you, Nitaji. India's engagement with transnational education is not merely expansion of higher education, but it is a strategic repositioning of India in a global knowledge order. That is the main crux of TNE. And from being a major outbound student nation to become a global education hub. That is the main crux of the TNE. But there is a three kind of structural reality in TNE. One is scale, second is in demand-supply gap, and third is global mobility. So when in this context of scale, India's higher education system is one of the largest higher education system compared to other. Geopolitically, it has meaning. Geopolitically, it has very important. In fact, I've been as a Fulbright scholar and I visited a number of more than 40 universities. And if you look at the US Constitution, there is no subject of education in their constitution. Whereas in Indian Constitution, although there are subject in a, that list, concurrent list, where state and central can play important role. But in US education system, you cannot have any control over in that education system. That is a lacunas. But we always talked about how champions of US universities in the quality and other things, that's a different part. But geopolitics in this context, democratization of higher education, and geopolitically playing an important role as security environment, I think TNE would be playing an important role, number one. Then second is the demand-supply gap, where gross enrollment ratio, yesterday also I pointed out that the massification of higher education comes to the state-funded universities. Their enrollment is higher than others university, but at the same time, there are the universities, institution of importance universities, central universities, private universities playing a very important role. So what we need to develop their capacity with the funding, not only just policy. And hardly we talked about that, who is going to funds to whom. Means a university like a Symbiosis or Pune, that's not only just, what about the funding? What is the criteria? There's nothing. And third is the global mobility, where 1 million Indian students study abroad annually. So with this 3-4 factor, what TNE provides the opportunity. One is to retain talent within India. Second is to attract foreign institution of the students. And third is to promote Indian knowledge system globally. So if we take example of traditional languages, the Sanskrit, Pali, Yoga, that can become a source of strength to change the geopolitical map where these issues can come in the name. And NEP says that. So that's why we are now moving from brain drain to brain circulation. And here the main issue is the geopolitics comes. Thank you.
So thank you very much for those first remarks that all of you gave. In the second round, I just want to know, how does TNE, the entire policy, align with the national development agenda? So finally, not only about India, but of course, we will center ourselves around it, but also whenever any country is being opened, because we also studied several hubs. We produced a report in which we're trying to look at all these hubs. What is the rationale? Why are they opening up so much? And is this opening up helping any country in meeting its own national development agenda? Does it really? So one of the arguments for TNE is that innovation we talked about. But the innovation has to happen in an ecosystem which is very locally grounded. So how do you see the alignment between the policies? Yes. Ma'am, how do you find the alignment between, do you see the alignment with the national agenda? And also within NEP, we are also talking about multidisciplinarity. Throughout the NEP document, we talk about multidisciplinarity of the universities. But when we look at the reality of TNE, or at least the IBCs that have already come in, we do not see that. When it comes to, also one other thing we talk about is IKS. Are Indian universities going abroad? Are they talking about Indian knowledge system? No. In fact, they have been asked to align with what is to be done there. For example, Dubai. I mean, our universities that are establishing campuses are expected to teach Arabic, so not Sanskrit. So is that meeting the need for taking IKS outside? No. If the people who are coming in, are they looking at IKS? No. Or I'm just identifying a few points and then we'll see how it addresses or not. GER, yesterday we had a meeting, a round table in which many people said, no, it is no way connected to GER. So what national development agenda does this particular policy of inviting and opening up, I will not say inviting foreign universities only, but also Indian universities going abroad, how is it aligning with the rest of the things in NEP and most importantly, the national development agenda? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta, for that very pertinent question. You see, world over, when you look at the 21st century, you're seeing countries trying to position themselves as very powerful knowledge economies. And what happens in the case of India is that, I think the point was said in a number of panels earlier, is the strength that India's human capital has. Having the demographics on our right side as being the youngest nation in the world. And that strength is something which drives the national development agenda to what the current ambition of 100 years of India's independence culminating in Viksit Bharat at the rate 2047, right? Now, when you look at the Viksit Bharat agenda of 2047, education is seen not as a subset of the knowledge economy. Education is the driver of the knowledge economy. And therefore, the role that education plays, and as Chetan said when we wrote in the NEP, that education happens in a logical continuum from preschool education. Chancellor Dr. Majumdar sir in his talk talked about the importance of early childhood care and education. Right from there, the nurturing of the human intelligence to be able to drive change and to be able to contribute to the human capacities that lead to social transformations, economic development, and so on, is something that the policy wrote about and which forms a critical part of any national development agenda. So the role of education, I think, when we are sitting over here for 3 days and deliberating about internationalization of higher education, it is, as I said in the very first day when I was chairing a paper presentation session, education may not, you don't look at TNE or internationalization as a subset of it. It is a reflection of one of the components of higher education that helps to create or contribute to a very positive knowledge economy. And in that sense, therefore, when you, all the agendas that we are looking at in terms of international branch campuses coming here, your point that every country where we go to set up our campuses, it is natural. They will ask for their national development. They won't be thinking about, when they come over here, can we expect any university which is represented here, can they come from UK and tell us that, no, we will work for the national development of our country? No. We have invited them here for our students to get a global immersion so that they become global citizens. They contribute to the national agenda over here. So the question, there is no dichotomy there. There is absolutely no dichotomy. The policy, the implementation strategy plan that we are looking at, and its alignment to the national agenda, I think are all working in the same direction. But if I may just use this opportunity to, after the 3 days of discussions that we had, to just say that it's been quite a kind of an angst to know that there is a lot of need for better coordination, and so that, you know, the campuses that are being set up over here, as much as the institutions like Symbiosis, which are setting up the campuses, MIT and many others who've set up their campuses, you must have an enabling ecosystem, and that enabling ecosystem calls for certain perspectives, which maybe if you are having the time and you're asking us a question, I can put in a couple of very structured points, but at this stage I'll stop.
So, Chetan, would you like to come in? So, how do you see this? I mean, the alignment part of policies within NEP, does it align with the rest of the same question
I
that I
think the
asked?
policies of the
Other policies of NEP, I mean, other ideas of NEP and TNE, are they aligning? Like multidisciplinary university,
so
like
it's too
Indian
early
knowledge
to,
system, GER.
Yeah, it's too
some of
early
the
to
things.
evaluate the alignment, but it's good to be thoughtful about the potential misalignment. In a sense, for example, the UGC Regulations of 23-25, that revised version, they have certain sense of autonomy given to institutions, whereas there's also accountability in terms of institutions to comply to ones who are establishing their campuses here. But now in terms of alignment, what Dr. Shakila mentioned is, one is the spirit of the NEP and its engagement with, because once they come to the country, they're supposed to follow the norms of the system that we are part of, right? And essentially to add value to the agenda that what was envisaged in the policy. So I'll give one simple example of curriculum alignment. Now, there is autonomy given to the institutions in the regulations to adapt their own curricular frame, curricular component, including the all those important words that we call POs, COs, LOs eventually, that will all come through. But it's from the university which is the host university, the origin, the place where the university emerges from. But here is where we have the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, we have the Academic Bank of Credit, we have the National Curriculum Framework, which sets the credits from grade 8 to the upward engagements of the degrees that we get there. So how are they going to reconcile that? So is it only limited to the mobility and flexibility for students who are within Indian higher education, or will they also be not given to those who are going to pursue their education in India through the IBC, is one part. And the last point, I think, in India, we are now, by virtue of the NEP's engagement, in fact, last 48 hours, there's a discussion on how we should revisit accreditation process, right? So there is where another challenge comes in, right? So we have the global standards of accreditation, we have the national expectation from accreditation from input process to output and outcome, the shift is happening. What will happen to these IBCs? And finally, the IDP. So the crux of the autonomy that one has to exercise is in the institutional development plan. Now for the nation building project that I was referring to, it is not possible to have a one-size-fits-all framework, which is what we were doing traditionally until 2020. Post 2021, we are looking at institutions at the heart of the whole planning process, aligned to their local and global aspiration, come with a local IDP plan over 10 to 15 years, and then say how you can contribute to the nation. Instead of the nation saying, this is what we expect from you, which is usually done in the earlier models, but not now, but still there's an expectation. So the agencies, the other policies were pushing for us to do that. But now there's a pushback on micro to macro rather than from macro to micro. I think this is where I'm not sure how these IBCs would work with, because they're also isolated from the public generally, because they're located in gift cities.
Yes. It's the very, very important points, Chetan, that you made, because, yes, Eldo wants to say something. I'll bring you in, Eldo. But what, Chetan, you said about these smaller details that are not worked out. So yesterday, I think today, Matthew was saying that, in India, everything happens in a hurry. Everything is done. So, of course, some people call it a sense of urgency with which it is done, and some people may call it a very hurried work that is being done. Of course, these two are very different, and maybe we'll have to discuss that. But before that, I'll call in Eldo. Eldo, you wanted to make a point. After that, I'll come to Rajan, sir.
I would like to give some examples about addressing the national development needs. One is IIT Bombay's partnership with Monash University. It's an excellent example addressing the sustainable development goals. And very recently, Western Sydney University partnered with an industry in Chennai forgot the name of that organization, for offering micro credentials. The last December that MOU was signed. And there are many other interesting examples. This is Cranfield University's partnership with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. And these partnerships do not get much media attention. These are all interesting partnerships. And of course, these are all, because whether it is Aeronautics Limited or IIT Madras, these are all public institutions and catering to the needs of society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Professor, you want to say something immediately? Yes. Yeah, quick remark, and then I'll have a question for you as well.
There is a paradigm shift in understanding higher education system. Particularly when we talked about outbound student, there was a train, but the train is going to change now. Earlier, basically you need to understand Indian higher education decided by parents, not by the kids. So very frankly, they decide where their kids goes, and that is the real problem for everyone. Even today morning, my mother called from 500 kilometers that what you had eaten for the breakfast. So this is the control by the home, control by the state, and control by the regulator. Number one. Number two, second is the higher education. Earlier, most of the parents wanted to send their kids in US, UK, Australia. But suddenly, after COVID, the trends are reversed. Now, most of the students parents are looking towards the Europe, and particularly Germany. Just last week, I had an interaction with Council General. You can't believe from 5,000 to 65,000 students are now students in Germany. And German government is giving the free of cost education only language. So this kind of, there is a paradigm shift in higher education. So we need to understand this mindset of the parents, family, regulatory authority, and then TNE. Thank you.
That's true. I mean, just along with, as we're discussing policies, of course, the policies are made for people, and they're understanding their approach to entire education, higher education, school education, that becomes very important. Just as we're discussing, you spoke about the asymmetry still remains when it comes to students going abroad. We still remain a source country globally when it comes to international students. So does this asymmetry also get reflected when it comes to regulatory bodies? Because regulatory bodies that are existing where our universities are being hosted end up having a say in the matter that, a lot of say in the matters that our universities do, the way they offer programs, what kind of programs offered, how they are offered, who teaches, who learns, several things. There are quite a few regulatory restrictions that our universities have to navigate as they go and establish campuses. And when universities are coming in, so there's a kind of we discussed about it, that there is a red carpet welcome. So do you also see kind of an asymmetry in the regulatory bodies as well, Dr.
Yeah, you're referring on the institutional part, right? I think before I really come to that, and looking at what was just mentioned earlier, I think there are two perspectives that we need to bear this in mind. And when we start looking at the global education and the transnational education, and the same thing when I come down then to the institutional part will become important. From a national point of view, when we start looking at what are our challenges, which is what I said right in the beginning. But the first part, I'll still maintain, is that today, how does an average student in this country who wants an education gets education? That's a question. That's a challenge. And we still don't have an answer for that. Because the answer, whatever that is being talked about, is more from a point of view for physical infrastructure being created for education, which is not really possible at all. By any kind of a stretch of imagination, the time and the monetary resources required for that very kind of a purposes to reach to that kind of a 50% or a 60% GER, the quantum of resources that would be required is so humongous that I don't think anybody is in a position to be able to do it. which is where, nonetheless, the leveraging the technology today has become important. And invariably, today is a day when almost every student today is really looking at it. Can I really get to learn? Can I get a degree, let us say, from Symbiosis, sitting in, let's say, somewhere in the Northeast, where I don't have an access? There's an infrastructure challenge. Can I get a foreign university degree sitting in, let's say, somewhere deep south? Can I do that? I don't. And which is where the technology is really providing. So can I leverage technology today? And I think today when I start looking at, from an institutional point of view, institutions that have grown on the strength of being able to leverage all the three modes of education. Not just physical, but the online, the hybrid, and above all, looking at multiple programs, catering to the multiple needs of the learners itself, the various segments of learners. It isn't just merely one kind of a segment of learner that we are referring to. What we are really looking at is that there is a one student, this type of a student, this is what is the need of this particular student. The fact is that there are multiple categories of these students with multiple needs itself, which is where somebody talked about it. The need for it, I think Dr. Khare referred to, for example, the need for, say, yoga education, sports, for example, health, or even some of the other areas like tribal arts, or for that matter, the vocational skills that was being talked about by Mr. Armstrong, for example, the vocational part of it. But in addition to, so therefore, can I look at it from the point of view of the multiple programs, multiple modes of delivery? And second, that can I, when we look at the other part, what is the national need today, is in terms of the research? And institutional need, what is that? On the one leg, very important criteria, teaching. The second is the research. The research today, unfortunately, has lagged behind. When we start looking at global education, is there a way by which we can bring in this kind of a part? And there where is the research excellence in some of the emerging areas. Not really something which we know of. Knowing what is known further as of no value. Knowing what I don't know today, but which is required for the purposes of this nation, for the nation building. That is where, and that's where the transnational education, when the foreign universities come in, can we sort of bring that kind of perspectives.
Yeah, I think, ma'am, you want to add something, a couple of points, because when it comes to research, there are a lot of questions that are being raised, whether the IBCs, you raised about questions about research and innovation, but how much is the contribution? Of course, it's very, very early to do any assessment, but are we even providing them the scope to carry out that research? Because some of them in other fora also where we discussed, they said they're not even allowed to carry out research, they have been mandated to teach. So these are some of the things. So maybe this is where we need this kind of discussions, these conversations that can also feed into policy somewhere. So if there are very, very clear inputs, you said you wanted to make a couple of points, so I invite you to do that.
Yeah, my points are not really limiting myself to research, which I'll come to a short while. But the point that you were asking earlier about the regulation, the fact remains that I was telling you that one of the gaps that I could gauge from the deliberations that have been happening over the last 2.5 days is that there have been a lot of regulations that go against the very spirit of an ecosystem that needs to nurture this kind of international collaboration that is happening. And if you remember during the round table, I mooted this idea that we need to have an interministerial group And I think it should come out in your outcome document that you plan to send across to the governments, that an interministerial group which has the stakeholder ministries to address issues relating to not just the taxation aspects, the visa aspects, even the intellectual property rights aspects, and many other things that need to come. If there is an IMG created, then it addresses many of the regulatory issues. Currently, what is happening is regulations themselves seem to contradict one another. And there are multiple windows that you need to start handling. What happens when you have an IMG is that it's a single window point of access. You don't have to run around to multiple points for getting clearances. If I remember Pro-Chancellor Vidyaji mentioning that she needs to go to the Ministry of Finance for something, somewhere else for some other aspect. So if you have an IMG with a single window operation, that is one solution that you can look at. Your question earlier about not aligning to multidisciplinarity, yes, because I think we are looking at only market-driven courses, and if you have TNEs only looking at market-driven courses, it is more of the same. You're not doing anything different. So where is the impact coming in? So the idea there again is that while we may have started at a very nascent stage of individual institutions signing MOUs, can we think of moving beyond that to something like consortia? When you have consortia, you automatically weave in multidisciplinarity. What is currently happening is the institutional strength may be in a given discipline-specific area. So if I tell an institution which is specializing in technology that you start offering something in design thinking or you start offering something in humanities, it's difficult for them. So when you have a consortia approach, that is where I think it can align to what we wrote in the NEP also in terms of that. And the third point that I would really like to sort of say, even though when we wrote the NEP and we were talking about internationalization at home and setting up campuses, and your very first question, did we think of foreign students coming in here? Yes, we wanted it. When we said we want to become a Vishwa Guru, we were not really looking at India becoming a Vishwa Guru where we may have students coming in from the US or Canada or Australia. You have to pitch in for the global south, and then you become a Vishwa Guru. And then that aligns itself with what you may talk in terms of your national agenda. Because when India politically, you asked that question to Chetan, and Chetan skirted away that question, which I can understand. When India is trying to project itself as a 5 trillion economy and to project our nation to become one of the largest economies in the world, it is a certain segment of countries that we would like to cater to and not to spread out ourselves too thinly. And so when you look at who needs it, we are all facing climate change. That's the global south is paying the price for the damage done by the global north. And so you must take a stand. I can see him shaking his head vigorously over there, but I'm sorry to say that. It is a fact that the global north is creating the damage, and the global south, without having funding for climate action, is trying to struggle with sustainable development and many other goals that we are. So why don't we think in terms of being a champion for internationalization at home, where we are catering to a segment of foreign students who can come in from the global south? So these were some of my 2 or 3 points that I wanted to say in the panel. But let me also make a very painful point. Yesterday in the official inauguration, we had a beautiful event of students lining up with flags from other nations. And it was very painful to see that we could not put our hands together to clap for students who came from other countries as much as we clapped only for our own nation. TNE doesn't succeed when an ecosystem of that kind is not there within the society itself. And I wanted to make that pain point that I wanted to bring. It was Sophia who was going on announcing that please let us continue to clap for students who came in from the other nations. So I think TNE is all about the society taking forward a spirit of inclusion, accepting diversity, and embracing those who come in as much as we embrace our own.
Right.
Sorry to be
Lots of interesting points. Very, very exciting ideas. So for also bringing in the global north and the global south debate, right? And we do come across on many things we do discuss about this kind of an asymmetry that exists, and we have been talking about asymmetry. वो कत्ल भी करते हैं तो जिक्र नहीं होता, हम आहें भरते हैं और बदनाम हो जाते हैं. So this has been a reality we are dealing with for a long, long time, and so now I think we have enough. It's time already. We didn't realize, it was already running time, but now we think we'll take a few questions. There's already one, two. Okay, we'll take two from there. Okay, yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
I am Sandeep Singh, research scholar with Symbiosis International University. My question is for Dr. Shakila ma'am, and it will be on the lines of internationalization at home and national development agenda. For that, ma'am, I would like to seek your kind attention, and we'll go to central India, the capital of Indian state of Chhattisgarh, Raipur. It's an emerging hub of international students in India with very good activities in the field of internationalization. We just go 110 kilometers north of Raipur. Bilaspur is yet another Indian city where we have very good number of international students coming particularly from the global south, very specifically from the African countries. Now, we move 250 kilometers west from Raipur, we come to Nagpur, the geographic center of India. We have Government Engineering College, VNIT, National Institute of Technology, we have NLU, we have IIM, we have the National Cancer Institute, we have our own Symbiosis facility in Nagpur, Symbiosis Nagpur. Just adjacent to it is Narsi Munji campus is also coming up. Best part, even the Honorable Chief Minister of our Maharashtra is from Nagpur. Still, not even single drop of international students, no traces of internationalization in Nagpur. What could be the possible reasons for this, ma'am?
So internationalization is limited to metropolitan cities, and this has been one of the discussions points in many of the fora. So
Okay.
your reflections.
Sandeep, you said your name is?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 cities need a lot of, I would say, encouragement in terms of moving forward. In fact, if I may put a throwback, when we set up the new institutions under the 11th five-year plan period, central universities and so on, we went on to actually not establish them into the metros. We actually went into the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Now that's as far as setting up the institutions. But I think your question is more about why is it that these students who are coming in from the global south cannot get jobs over here. That's where I was trying to tell you that policies that may come in from MHA and MEA vis-a-vis what we may want to do it in MOE may not be necessarily at sync. Now, when you say that years back when I used to be in the IGNOU Regional Center and where Symbiosis Gratis had given us accommodation to set up our regional center, students who used to come to get IGNOU admission, the only reason they were doing that was for their visa extension. And what were we being told was that don't give admissions to international students unless they have a valid. So it's the chicken and the egg situation. So they come in very honestly saying that we want to extend our stay. So आप IGNOU में admission देंगे तो हम लोग का visa extend हो जाएंगे. IGNOU वाले बताएंगे कि नहीं, you cannot give students admission, so that becomes a reason for their visa extension kind of a thing. So the point relating to jobs comes not because we are against them taking a kind of, am I exceeding the time? Is that what? Okay. Okay. No, so the jobs not being available to our own people, tomorrow you will have politically a kind of a reaction that comes कि हमारे youth को jobs नहीं मिल रहे हैं और ये यहाँ पे हम लोग जो foreign students आए हुए उनके लिए jobs दे रहे हैं. So the question is about creating more job opportunities, Moment we reach that level of development, I don't think there should be a kind of a disconnect in getting these young people coming in from these nations also. And let me tell you, there are states in this country where there are foreign nationals who actually go in for as gig workers and so on, provided, of course, there are people who insulate them, saying that, okay, we stand guarantee for them that they would not be able to violate. But as someone said in the morning, being a Zepto delivery person or a Zomato delivery person, there's nothing wrong, but that is, you know, they are able to sort of sustain their own educational fees doing in those kind of jobs also. But right now, no, I don't think we have space to allow students coming in to be given jobs unless we have a policy framework that enables that kind. And as long as there are underemployed and unemployed Indian students, that might be opening up a Pandora's box.
I think what you said earlier, like interministerial group, is something that's something on with a sense of urgency we may have to do it.
No, I think, Nita, there is another part. That is, I think if we were to look at the state policy also with regard to the foreign education and foreign students, that I think we need to be really looking at. If a particular state is really more aggressively looking at or is allowing the foreign students to be coming in, then it's a different matter. What is happening in the state of Maharashtra is that we have just opened up the state for foreign universities to be coming in. It's just a few months kind of an old story that we have really started off with. And that too by, you know, sort of saying that, okay, fine, somewhere in Navi Mumbai, we have created a place where we want those universities to be coming in. And so therefore, the British universities and some of the others, they have started now coming in. But I think so far we have not really been that kind of aggressive as a state, as opposed to some of the other states. So from that kind of a point of view, that's one part. The second part of it is that the institutions who have taken the lead on their own, for example, Symbiosis, have gone out of India even without a policy and getting the students in. So as a city, for example, Pune, today is still having a much larger number of foreign students as opposed to any other city in the country itself, if we were to look at it. So Pune has become a kind of a hub itself. So in terms of the ecosystem also, you know, the system itself has been such that it has supported the foreign students itself. So I think it's a combination of the ecosystem and the policy which has really made what we really take a look at it from that kind of perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Chetan, you can add and then I'll come to Icha, then your question, then I'll come to you, KK.
I'll not answer, but I'll just give a perspective for you to reflect upon. One is what Dr. Saxena sir said is very important, that state policies, because as Professor Khare mentioned, this problem of this concurrent list, that where education stands in the constitution, creates a lot of challenges, number one. Two, you should also ask the universities why don't they prefer to come there also, right? That is also another aspect, right? It could be as simple as the climate to the safety to the ecosystem in which they would like to come, because that's also another idea. Because most Indian universities who went out, they also had the preferences why they went there and not somewhere else. For example, why not to the neighborhood, which is where we have common history, common belief systems, cultural systems, etc. That's another thing. Third, since Eldo is here, State Higher Education Council also is here. So he can give actually the perspective on how they also think through in terms of looking at how to persuade universities to come to them on one hand. And why should they pursue it is also the other question. You know, that's very much like a spectrum in which you have to see this perspective. So that's quickly I wanted to share.
I think you should come in very quickly because, you know, we need to take other questions. But the kind of work you're doing in Kerala, I think that needs to be very quickly, if you can brief as to what the state governments are doing for this purpose.
From Kerala's perspective, again, I can give an example because the northern part of Kerala is Kasaragod. Just a few kilometers away from Kasaragod is Manipal's main center. Manipal is able to attract more than 2,000 foreign students, but the total number of foreign students in Kerala is less than 700. But we are addressing this issue. Government is funding for construction of foreign students' hostels in 3 universities. But again, institutional strategy is a major issue. Institutions should have clear strategy for attracting students. Through ICCR, Kerala's universities get more than 6,000 applications every year, but not able to accommodate even 1,000 students, because University of Kerala still gets more than thousands of applications every year. And the atmosphere is very important, like Chetan mentioned about the safety. Probably that's why students prefer Kerala over other states when it comes to these ICCR programs.
Thank you. I think we will collect a few questions and then a few remarks. Maybe we'll do that, Icha, and then I'll come to KK.
I am a part-time PhD scholar here, and I also work as a senior sub-editor with the Indian Express. I wanted to ask something very fundamental, because the dais is filled with policymakers and marketeer. So I wanted to understand that at this moment on ground, how do y'all understand and define high-quality education and world-class education? I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Okay, what is your idea of world-class university,
Yeah.
world-class higher education, world-class university?
World-class.
Not really.
Quality in
world-class,
higher
yeah.
education and world-classness or whatever that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
since I'm
Maybe
responding
we'll
to
connect. Shall we collect another 2-3 questions
Yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe
right.
we ask? Yeah, KK, and yeah, there's one question there. And if you are addressing it to any specific member, please, and introduce yourself, KK.
My question is very simple, ma'am. It's in 2 parts. Number 1, when we are thinking about transnational education, we definitely think about quality education. Quality education to be, I mean, from the foreign, good quality institution should come, and from here. So quality is important. Now, when we are thinking about the student's profile, what kind of students go into these quality institutions? There, the problem is it is market-driven. Now, when we say market-driven, then maybe everybody cannot afford those quality education. That is number 1. Number 2, do you think by any way in future, we are bringing more inequality in terms of quality education, or it is resolving the problem of quality education?
Okay,
Anybody
okay,
can.
thank you very much. One more question. Can you pass the mic, KK, there? That's the idea. No other questions? We can take one more.
Thank you very much.
There's one. Huesha, you meet later, because you have been in touch. There's one more question we'll take. Yeah.
As part of the new education policy, we have policymakers on the dais here. My name is Rutvik Pungalia, and you know, traditionally we've had very academic-driven curriculums, and as part of the new education policy, we have field project, on-job training that are currently being embedded and rolled out across state universities and colleges, which students are getting benefited gradually. With the TNE and the foreign universities coming here, what component of hands-on experience that they will be able to provide to match it with the new education policy? And is there an edge for Indian universities as a result to sort of stand themselves out and be a niche in that area?
Thank you. One last question, and then I request all of you to very quickly answer all of them very briefly, and then we'll close it.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. George Collett. I'm country representative for Qualifications Scotland, formerly known as Scottish Qualification Authority. It's not so much about a question, but actually an intervention or a comment that I want to make. With the NEP, similar to Qualifications Scotland, there are international awarding and accreditation bodies also operating in India right now. And we have been in India for quite some time. And the interesting element is this, that there are Indian institutions offering internationally accredited or Scottish qualifications in India, and mostly targeting the graduates or learners from outside India, and that's the beauty of it. So there's a lot of inward migration that is already happening through this. There are a number of countries where these institutions are offering, and graduates are coming to participate in Indian universities. That's a good model that actually India can continue to work on. And we are not the only one. I know that there is person, there is Qualify, UFCAL, and there is also a regulatory body from Australia coming through. That is one comment that I want to make with regard to policy. And the NEP that has actually enabled credit transfer. And that is a beautiful component because today I can actually study maybe a module or a SEM or an year, maybe in India, move to any other university around the world, and we facilitate that to 80 universities around the world. Similar systems are already happening. I just wanted to contribute to this discussion because TNE is not only about branch campus as such, it's also regulatory international bodies coming into the country. If you will allow me, two more points I want to make. Is that okay?
I think we are running short of time, and thank you for your intervention. Thank you so much. Because we are running short of time, and last, very, very quick comments by each one of you. The questions related to, exactly. I would like to start with Eldo, maybe. And
quality question I can respond.
No, you want to, okay, the
Quality.
earlier question, that question you want to answer,
yeah,
please.
The quality and the world-class component, yeah. I think one is with the TNE coming in and also with the new changes that we are seeing in the system currently, we should move from world-class university models to world-class university systems. I think that's something which is very crucial at this stage. And that's why we have seen in our own neighborhood, the way Southeast Asia and also China has evolved over time, is this shift that is something which we're missing. Because we are not only siloing within institution, we are siloing across institution. So that's one quick point. But coming to the high quality, I think we have to shift from ownership-centric approach to function-oriented approach, which is also the NEP's crux, that is shifting to teaching, research, and service, which is common across the globe. Then define quality which is locally relevant to us. And in terms of teaching, for instance, for student profile to faculty profile, research, output to outcome in terms of innovation, which is locally relevant, and service, the impact component. So we have to define. That's why the pushback from the, Ashwin, my friend, is not here, but the quality, we often keep debating that why should we localize quality and not necessarily measure quality from top? Eventually, we'll have to align. So that's the reason why even NIRF was thought through. It has own challenges, but still the purpose was that, to localize quality, and that's how I would quickly respond to your question.
Aldo.
Yeah, okay. Quality is an important aspect, and also we should not forget that this is a market-mediated sector, this India's TNE. If institutions are not able to assure job placements, it would be difficult to sustain in the long run.
Inequality is across the globe in higher education. You will not find equality, everywhere. But in the Indian context, what we need to set a goal. At least 6% of GDP should spend on higher education. So at least those who are in a vulnerable section, they can enroll in higher education. That is we should take care of. Thank you.
Well, when we talk about the quality, and that was something that was a question that was there, that did come up. I think, and since my background is management, as you said it right in the beginning itself, I look at it from the point of view of what happened in the industry post-liberalization. When the Indian industry, when faced with the challenge of a global firms coming in India, what did the Indian companies really do? Did they really sort of stay where they were? They were actually learning how to improve their own quality. I think what I really see is that when the foreign institutions do come in and bring in their own quality standards, that's going to have a kind of a ripple effect. It'll have a rip-off on the Indian institutions also. And it'll be a sheer force, the market force, that will drive the Indian institutions forward to improve their own quality itself. And therefore, the better of today, the ones like Symbiosis or Manipal, or any of these top institutions will further go up when we start looking at it from the point of view of the global ranking or global accreditations and many of those other areas. And they will be really be far more competitive than what they are at this point of time. So I think it's an overall ecosystem that should really develop from that kind of a perspective. That's what my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I think yesterday there was someone who said, I hate mediocrity, right? And I think many of us over here will resonate with that idea. And mediocrity in education is a very large price to pay. So quality has always been one of the hallmarks, because we always look at certain terms. So it was access, equity, excellence, translating into quality as far as excellence is concerned. That's how you had innovation universities that we thought about first, then world-class universities that we have, then the institutions of eminence. But then quality has to be there, not as islands of excellence. It needs to be massified. And the metrics of quality comes in with all the three stakeholders. So what can you do for better quality of faculty? How do you improve the quality of teaching so that the student outcomes become better? How do you ensure institutional excellence? So it's a very broad topic to really summarize it. But coming to your question, in terms of whether the TNE adds to the existing inequalities and maybe stretch it to greater inequities that happen within the society, it was never intended to be massified. TNE was never intended to be massified, and it cannot be massified. It is intended, as I said, for a certain segment of an audience, which would have otherwise been investing their amount or their economics outside the country to remain over here. However, even if you were to do that in a longer run, by doing that, why the mindset, if you are actually making them very inclusive in their approach, those very students who come out of those institutions will have a lot of development agenda that would add to the value in the society. That's how I would look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And maybe the discussions on TNE will continue. But some of questions of how do we democratize access? Access remains a big question. Not only, last 3 days we have been discussing about education more as a matter of system. We are looking at it as a system. But education is also a beautiful idea. It's a philosophy where we look at building the character of an individual, building the nation with the foundation on peace, understanding, patience. So when we look at all that, and those are the ideas and ideals on which education needs to build. But in today's world, it works more on a system. And therefore, how do we bring these ideas remaining close to the entire system and systemic function, and how this philosophy of education, how do we make it remain at the foundation of the entire system to make it reachable to every individual, forming the character of the nation. Thank you very much for being with us. And over to people over here, Damini and my colleague Suchetna.
Thank you. Thank you for that very engaging session. I now invite Dr. Raman, Vice Chancellor, SIU, to kindly felicitate our speakers and moderator. May I invite Dr. Vidya on stage for closing remarks?
August dais and faculty, and more importantly, the research scholars. It was an academic treat over the last 3 days. I would say that the first day, honestly speaking, we've always had the IHE over only 2 days and not 3 days. But this time, Neeta insisted that we must have the pre-conference as a full day research paper presentations. And somehow I acceded to her request, and I must tell you, Neeta, that was the best day with having some young researchers presenting such wonderful ideas, very different thoughts, and it was very, very exciting to see them present and some of the experts chairing those sessions and moderating those sessions and even giving their inputs. So day one was excellent. Of course, day two, we had none other than the Maharashtra government being represented here. So as a state, the Maharashtra government is now in the forefront of imparting higher education at a, I would say, at a very aggressive pace. As I said that I was telling someone that I recently attended a lunch meeting with the delegation from Canada, which was led by the Prime Minister of Canada. And there were different secretaries making presentations, but 80% of the presentation and the Chief Minister's talk was on how Maharashtra can become a higher education destination. And it was very, it was really satisfying to see that this state is now regaining again its own, status of being a higher education destination, which it was several years ago, with Pune, of course, being known as the Oxford of the East. So over the last 2 days, I'm sure there was a lot of takeaway for each one of you. We decided the topic on transnational education simply because this is the need of the hour to discuss this, because it is in transition. As I said, there are several views of people, and even the policy makers are still not very, or I would say they're still uncertain about how this transnational education is going to shape up. I'm sure we'll see the fruits only after 3 or 4 years when, universities are really here, they graduate students, and then we know where these students land up, whether they get jobs or whether they're happy going through a transnational education in their own home countries, etc. So the focus has been, of course, primarily on foreign university campuses, but transnational education, as we all know, is way beyond just discussing campuses. At some later stage, we should also discuss other facets of transnational education. So every year in the month of April, we organize this higher education summit, as I call it, focusing on internationalization of higher education, generally in the first week of April. And we hope that next year we'll come back again with a new topic on the same subject of internationalization of higher education. And we hope to see all of you in much larger numbers. I'm sure by now the word would spread amongst other research scholars, PhD students across India and across the globe. And we also hope that next year the geopolitical situation is far better than what it is today, because we don't see many foreign participants as we see every year in the IHE conference. I must put on record the efforts taken by the whole SCIE department and of course Sherpa, the Symbiosis Center for Research in Higher Education Policy Advocacy, by none other than Neeta Inamdar herself, who was felicitated yesterday by the Chancellor, and all the experts and speakers who've really taken efforts to come all the way. And it's not easy to come and participate in a panel discussion. It means a lot of reading, a lot of research, because every time you come and speak at a panel, you have to bring some new thoughts, some thoughts that are not mentioned anywhere in the literature. So thank you once again to all the panelists and the other panelists who've been in the panels over the last 2 days. So thank you, Neeta, once again. And of course, I hope I have not missed out anybody, but if I have, then forgive me. But we look forward to seeing you again the next year at the same venue, probably a different date. Thank you.
I request Dr. Raman to deliver a vote of thanks.
First and foremost, I thank AIU for supporting this conference. I also thank FICCI, ACPC, MSFDA, the media partner, the PI, and also the publishing partner, Discover, for supporting this year's IHE, hosted by Symbiosis International Deemed University. It is 4 o'clock, 3 days, but still, I just had a random head count here. It is 120 plus, which is fantastic. I think that shows that definitely there are people who are keen and interested in all sessions. I know there are some who had to leave because they had their flights to catch. They had other travel plans, so some of them left in the afternoon. Some of them had to leave yesterday as well. So thank you all for taking out time and being here and participating and also questioning and discussing. In fact, when it was 1.5 hours, some of the panelists told it's too long a time, but I think 1.5 hours went really fast for every panel discussion. And in fact, if it was 2 hours for half an hour of questioning also, there would have been enough questions for every panel. Last but not the least, I think all of you have now one opportunity, and it's a request from my end. Please do post in all social media platforms of what did you learn from here? How did it add value to all of you? On all social media platforms with hashtag IHE, hashtag symbiosis, hashtag SIU. Thank you all. God bless.